What's up? Hi. Welcome. Hey. How you guys doing? Great, man. Awesome. Well, this is really cool. Whenever I do a live podcast, I want you guys to know how they work, and then we'll jump right into the thing. First of all, like if you, I don't even know how many of you listen to my podcast. How many listen to the DTF? Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, the opening rants that you hear me do, I spend a lot of time on those rants. So it's a really weird few days when I'm doing that because I'm going back, recording, listening to myself, hearing what I said, thinking, God, who the fuck do you think you are, man? You sound crazy. Then going back and re-recording and re-recording and re-recording and re-recording and re-recording, trying various combinations of coffee and marijuana and mushrooms until something comes out that seems okay. And sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes it's just, I just put it up and I think, oh, well, I hope they forgive me for that one. So what I do in the live shows, because I think what's cool about a podcast is that it is a collaboration compared to other forms of entertainment. It's a collaboration not just between me and the guests, but between me and the listeners. I get incredible emails from you guys and tweets and texts correcting me, scolding me, telling me things that I should check out, telling me I don't fucking know what communism is, man. And I listen, and it helps me evolve a little bit. So for these live shows, I like to get suggestions from you guys about things we could talk about for the opening rant. So what do you guys want to talk about? Communism. First, somebody said not floating. Had enough? Yeah, how long you been here for one fucking day, man? Wait, you're the wrong conference. God damn these fucking float conferences. All they do is talk about floating around this fucking place. First float on psychedelics, sure, okay. What else?
Process.
What?
Creative process.
Okay, creative process, okay, that's cool.
Remember the mushrooms that I donated to you in LA at Comedy?
He asked if I ate the mushrooms that he gave to me at the Comedy Store. No, I didn't, officer, I'm drug-free. Anything else? What's that? Portland hipsters? I don't know. What was it? What is communism? Okay, well, I think I got a couple of things we could talk about for sure. I didn't look into communism yet, so I don't know, man. Seems interesting. So the other thing I like to do to start these shows off is to get everybody to Om together. And to Om for a little bit longer than any of us feel comfortable Oming for, which is the right amount of time to Om. Longer than you feel comfortable for. And it's really cool because a lot of us have never experienced congregational Oming and what that sounds like and how powerful it can be. And if you get over the first few minutes of weirdness and let yourself do it and just listen, you might find that it begins to create a really interesting effect inside of you. And it's also an interesting sound because at any given moment, all over the planet, hundreds and thousands of people, maybe more, are making that sound. And that's something that always trips me out. Not just people in temples, not just people in New Age cults, not just people in yoga studios, but kids are saying it every time they go, Mom! It's even in Mom, which is quite beautiful. So we're going to do the Om for a little while. And to get us started, I'm just going to light some incense here and pass it around. So if you, I don't know what the floor is like here, so probably don't drop the burning incense on anything flammable. But if some folks, I need 3 people to come up and just start passing this around. Wow, thanks. Did a dog just bark? Here you go. Thank you. You can just go back down and pass it all over the place. Thanks for jumping on. Wait, no, I've got 2 more. This is a really good one. My barber gave me this one. No joke. He said use it at the podcast. Yeah, this one's cool. I can't remember the name. I can't remember the name of it, man. He told me it's some kind of sap from a tree. You guys probably know what it is. It's not frankincense. Yeah, that's it. Copal. Which is interesting because the name of Krishna is Gopala, one of the names of Krishna. And the other kind of incense that we're passing around comes from Vrindavan in India, which is the birthplace of Krishna. So it's good shit, man. Thank you. There we go. All right, yeah, let's do it now. Greetings, my sweet friends. It is I, Duncan Trussell, and thou art listening to a live Duncan Trussell Family Hour podcast being recorded at the Portland Float Conference. Cool. Man, this is what you guys are doing here at this Float Conference is incredible, and I think it's really important, and I'm sure you guys have been talking and bowing to and honoring the creator of the first float tank, John Lilly. And yeah, I love John Lilly a lot, and John Lilly falls in line with a lot of other great inventors in the sense that we use their technology and we take their technology for granted that they brought into the world, but a lot of times we kind of forget the other stuff that they talked about. And John Lilly's a prime example of that. There's some other ones too. Nikola Tesla, for example, is another example of a genius. And both of them have something in common that I quite like, which is both of them claim in some way or another to have been contacted by entities. And what I like about John Lilly and Nikola Tesla is they weren't afraid to use that word, entity. They weren't afraid to talk about what was happening to them inside those. He wasn't afraid to talk about what was happening to him when he was taking psychedelics and floating. How many of you guys know that story about what happened to him in the tank? Clap if you know that story about. We live in a time now where some of the smartest people on earth, Elon Musk being one of them, are talking about the dangers of artificial intelligence. How recently with the scary shit that's going on with North Korea, Elon Musk said that we shouldn't be worried about North Korea, but we should instead be thinking about artificial intelligence because it's 1,000 times more dangerous than nuclear war. This is Elon Musk. This is one of the smartest people on planet Earth saying this. And what's really interesting about him saying that is that in 1974, John Lilly made contact with some kind of malevolent entity that he called a machine intelligence. He called it solid, what do you call it? Solid state intelligence. What's the name of it? Solid state intelligence. Some kind of entity that was going to manifest as technology and was going to use human beings to appear on the planet and take over. This was long before Elon Musk started working on solar panels. This was before AOL. This was before Twitter. This is before we had a tweeting president, or before we had the emergence of, the first emergence of a malevolent AI that I'm aware of, one of the first emergences, which is these fucking Twitter bots that are creating the impression of a majority that isn't there. And all of this was, in a weird way, predicted by the creator of float tanks. And it's amazing to really think about that, because I know a lot of people, they say, oh, you know, Lilly, later on down the line, he was like shooting too much ketamine and he lost his mind. And yet, he predicted one of the great problems that we are facing as a species today, which is that this technology that is coming through us has such great potential to transform the world in a beautiful way, and yet it has an equal potential to completely destroy the entire planet. Now, I'm sorry, I don't mean to start off on such a negative note, but I think it's if there was ever a time to talk about how important what you guys are doing is, it's at a float conference, right? It's to emphasize what you're doing. Maybe, I don't think any of you have forgotten it, but this technology that you are allowing so many people to have access to is a transformative technology. It's a transformative technology that is going to and has allowed so many people to get outside of their limited conceptualization of what life is and what they think the universe is, and to overcome the boundaries that this paradigm that we're in right now wraps around our fucking brains. It's showing people there is so much more to this universe than what you can see and what you can feel and what you can hear. Now, the first time I took psychedelics in a float tank was actually the last time I took psychedelics in a float tank. And I had this wonderful, for a while, I had this wonderful Zen tent created by Shane Stott. A beautiful thing, man. And I had it in my house. He came and helped me set it up. And I was really excited about it, you know, because suddenly I had this hole in the universe sitting right next to my podcast studio. So I could just go climb into this thing and vanish into time. And of course, I was thinking, man, I'm going to eat some fucking mushrooms and go in there, and I'm going to contact entities, and I'm going to get the transmission. So I did it, ate some mushrooms. Just joking, cop. I didn't really do that. For those of you listening, there's a police officer in the audience disguised as a hippie. I could see right through you, man. So I ate these mushrooms, went into the float tank, was floating in the tank, and it was beautiful for a second. And then the mushrooms very clearly started talking to me, I guess you could say, in the way that they do. And they said, why don't you go outside, man? This is dumb. What are you doing? Why are you laying in a dark pool of salt water when you could be under a tree or looking at birds? That's the first time I attempted to add something to the floating experience. The second time I attempted to add something to the floating experience, it was a bigger project, because there's something called the overview effect, which is I think it's called the overview effect. It's when astronauts see the Earth from space and they're floating there. That's what it's called, right, you guys? Yeah, the overview. Okay, so it's this profound moment where you look down and you see the flat Earth. And you're like, it was all a lie, man. They tricked me. No, it's this thing where you look and you see, this beautiful planet that we're all living on and how precious it is. And it's an intelligence, and it's a divine intelligence, and it is the mother, and we're all part of it. And it's our responsibility to make sure that this planet is kept alive and beautiful, and all these poor fucking animals that can't do anything to stop the industrialists and all the pain, and so you see it all, and you love it, and it like changes you forever. So I thought, shit, well, probably not going to go into space in this incarnation, but maybe I can create the overview effect by putting on virtual reality goggles in a float tank where I was looking down on planet Earth. So and anyone here who wants to try that, do it. Go for it. Try it. It's all yours. Maybe you can make it work. But what happened is, so we spent a lot of time with this, man. We built a simulation of floating in space. We waterproofed some VR goggles, strapped them on, very excited, went in the tank, floated there. And then within a few seconds, the fucking thing fogged up, and it's and it's heavy, you got this heavy thing strapped to your head. And I'm not afraid to say it. If John Lilly can talk about entities, then I can say that float tanks, they'll talk to you. They have a conversation with you. And the float tank said to me, what are you doing, man? Take that fucking thing off your head. It didn't say fucking, but it was this isn't. You're trying to add something. And that's what humans do, We want to add something to something that maybe doesn't need anything added on to it. Because when you're floating and finally you get to experience darkness, which is such a precious thing. And I think that when people first were talking about these beautiful devices, they were calling them isolation tanks or sensory deprivation chambers. And I think that's an indication of how absolutely crazy our society is. To say that if we take away light and if we float in this beautiful body temperature water, that somehow we're depriving our senses. When the float tank shows us, this is all you need. Nothing. This is all you need. In this darkness is everything. In this darkness is the Earth, is planet Earth, is the overview effect, is the overview effect not of the planet, but of everything, because it's what we all are. And so it's a healing technology that you guys are offering people when you bring them into the tank for the first time. And it's a transformative technology. And I think the reason so many of you, when I've gotten to talk to you, seem so fucking cool is because, as all transformative technologies, people who work with them are also transformed. This is something really hilarious. If you look up on the DEA website about LSD, you know what I'm talking about, man. One of the fascinating things I read about it, and it was kind of like a frustrated note about LSD distribution chains, is that an LSD distribution chain, it breaks down, because as people begin to sell LSD, they're taking LSD. And the more you take LSD, the more you're like, why am I selling this, man? I should give it away. And so the thing melts down on itself, because the technology that is LSD, it begins to transform the people who are utilizing it and giving it to other people. And I think the float tank, floating is the same way. And the more that you guys heal people in this way, the more you have to, I would suggest, you should be open to the possibility that John Lilly didn't do too much ketamine, that John Lilly was tuning into something very, very real, which is that we live in a living universe, and that this living universe has the desire right now to transform us, and to transform us in a way that we aren't machines, that we don't turn into robots, that we don't turn into Twitter bots, that we don't turn into people who only say what we think we're supposed to say and only parrot what other people tell us is the right thing to say. And I think that the more you open yourself up to that, the more you'll be transformed. And podcasting is a transformative technology. And when I first started podcasting, I was a very different person. Over the course of all these conversations, my life has shifted significantly. And that's what happens, I think, when you're doing something with even the slightest intention of helping the world at all. So today's guest, who's here with us today, is someone who is one of the people that has radically, just from knowing him, has radically shifted my life, has transformed the way I think about a lot of things, including sex, and he's especially sex. But a lot of other things too. And I think he's being transformed by his podcast in such a way that, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is how he's transformed over the course of doing his podcast, and what he's up to right now is pretty incredible because he's gone off the grid. And so I'd really love you guys to give a giant round of applause to our guest today. He is the co-author of an amazing book that you may have heard of called Sex at Dawn. He has an amazing podcast called Tangentially Speaking. Everybody, please open up your heart chakras and send out as much loving energy as you possibly can to today's guest, Chris Ryan. Chris Ryan, it's on.
It's on. How you doing? Free floaters. What's up?
Chris, I was listening to your last podcast. You're floating not in tanks now, but you've been on basically a van tour, I guess you would call it. What are you calling it?
Vanthropology 2017.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you've been living in a van, and one of the really poignant and incredible things that you are talking about is the joy of swimming in a river.
Every morning, yeah, when possible, and every afternoon. Yeah, we're sort of cruising around, and we're up in Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Oregon, Northern California, and the roads go along these beautiful rivers. And normally you're driving along and you look at it and you think, oh, I'll bet it's nice to swim in that river. But now it's just, fuck it, pull over, find a spot, and jump in. It's fantastic.
What was it before you went on the Vanthropology tour? When was the last time you swam in a river?
Oh, good question. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I mean,
That's how you can tell how fucked up you are. Like, if you want to figure out how fucked up you are, just ask yourself, when was the last time you swam in a river?
Yeah. Well,
and if it's like more than a few months, you're fucked up.
Yeah. Or do you know what phase the moon is in right now? You know, when I'm living in a city, I never know. When I'm out on the road, I always know.
What phase is it in?
It was full about a week ago. Yeah. So it's
that ain't a phase.
It's a week past full.
That's like a cosmology term. Oh, it's in the phase full about a week ago.
It's waning. It's waning, Duncan.
Oh, it's waning? Is that what they call it?
Yeah. Waxing and waning.
Okay.
Yeah.
But don't they have different names for this specific? Isn't it like...
It's like quarter.
What? Did anyone know the
few
phase?
People know.
What? It's waning gibbous.
Gibbous, yeah. There's
right on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah.
Waning gibbous moon.
Yeah, I think that's where it is now. It's
God,
a waning gibbous.
I have to learn the phases of the moon, not only because it connects you to nature, because it makes you sound like a black metal rock star. Waning gibbous. Yeah, well, yeah, so...
See, I don't know about this, though. I don't know if I want to know all these terminologies, because getting into your technology thing. Like, I don't know a lot of constellations. I only know the Big Dipper and maybe Orion's Belt. I think that's about it. And I wonder, what's it like? I look at the sky at night, and I see just a shitload of stars. I don't know how I want to trade that for, there's blah, 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 and there's blah, blah, blah. It's a different way of seeing things, right? Which gets into technology, and we start naming things, then we see them differently.
I mean, yes, not to knock any astronomers who might be in the crowd, but
no,
certainly like when you're like laying in the sand of, let's say, I don't know, the playa at Burning Man, and you're gazing up at the stars, and your eyes are blacker than the night. And you're gazing up at the stars. One thing you don't want is for someone to be like, no, and there's the Orion's Belt, and the Sea of Pleiades. No, I know what you mean. And
ignorance helps in a way. It keeps you open. There's an innocence and a genius to ignorance, I think, which I'm trying to preserve as much as possible.
I think you're doing a good job, man. I mean that in the most, for real, I think that's what you represent to me, is this enlightened sage who is like, because, when we first met.
Yeah, that was before you had your PhD.
What?
It was before you had your PhD, right?
Yeah, right. For those of you who don't know, because Chris used to have PhD next to his Twitter name, I realized oh, fuck, anyone can put PhD there.
He stole my PhD is what he did.
I put PhD next to mine, and then it's great because occasionally people who are mad about something you tweeted will be like, what kind of fucking doctor are you, man? Yeah, man, but when I first met you, you fall into a class of person that I get to make contact with through the podcast occasionally. You're a traveler, and you're somebody who has somehow avoided being completely tied down to a single place. You're a traveler. When I first met you, you were traveling. Your travels seem to be, if anything, you seem to be becoming even more disconnected in some way. I know you have a place in Topanga. I don't mean disconnected in a bad way, but it feels like from listening to you talk about these experiences out on the road that you're being drawn deeper and deeper into a lifestyle that I don't even think a lot of people are aware of as an option for them, or at least it doesn't seem to be a realistic option if you find yourself knee deep in kids and a job and a marriage and a thing and the stuff and to like go and travel around in a van. I mean, isn't that, in fact, we live in a society where that is made fun of, right? There's a meme, van down by the river, right?
Right. But there's a counter meme now, which is this sort of glamour of like modern nomadism. And like there was a big article some of you may have seen in the New Yorker 6 months ago about a couple that travel around in their van and it's glamorizing it and it's cool. And I mean, in their case, it was kind of funny because they finance their trip with their Instagram page because they've got so many followers. Then they do product placements and their branding and they're sponsored by this van company and they've got all this stuff. So it's sort of tied into the whole commercial thing, even though it's a counterexample in some ways.
Do you think that's bad?
I don't have any moral judgment about it. No, I mean, I think people do what they need to do. Like on my podcast, I don't have any ads, but it's not a moral judgment. It's just that I felt weird selling underwear. You know, because a lot of what I talk about on the podcast is don't wear underwear. And I made him spit. I made a comedian spit, ladies and gentlemen. It's the high point of my life. Yeah.
Man, that's nuts. Why don't you think we should wear underwear?
Go commando. When I was 11 years old, my kung fu teacher told me never wear underwear and always sleep in the nude. And
he's in jail now, right?
Do you remember? I told you this story on Joe Rogan's. He killed his father. This was before he killed his father, yeah. But now I'm going to make him cry. Just watch.
Do you think he killed his father because he walked in on him? He's wearing underwear while he was sleeping.
It's too tight.
That's
too
the
tight.
last straw, Dan.
No, it was a strange thing. Yeah, his father was abusing his mother, and they got into a fight, and it was this big thing.
Wow.
Yeah, that was when I told that story on Joe Rogan's podcast. One of the first times I was on, maybe the first time, and I got a sense for the power of that podcast because a day later I got an email from a guy who said, yeah, I heard you talking about this thing and I was the prosecuting attorney in that county and here you missed this date or this whatever. And it's like, how many fucking people are listening to this podcast?
Right.
That the prosecuting attorney from 1974 in Western Pennsylvania happened to be one of them.
That is one of the things I try to keep out of my mind completely during a podcast because when you start thinking about that, you can go absolutely nuts, especially Rogan's podcast where you're like, if there is an Illuminati, probably like two of them are listening to this shit, probably. So like there is that thing.
Yeah, while they work out. Yeah.
While they swing kettlebells inside a pyramid or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, it's interesting.
It is weird. Do you get this thing like when you're at a sporting event in a stadium and you look around and you're like, okay, this is 70,000 people. This is what 70,000 people, like my podcast, I get around 80 to 100,000 downloads per episode.
Yeah.
And sometimes like I was at the Rose Bowl and it's like, that's 50,000 people.
Yeah, you know what I try to do? I always refer to there's a verse from the Bhagavad Gita, which is, you have a right to your action, you do not have a right to the fruits of your action. So it's like with a podcast, if you get caught up in that, which I know what you're saying, and sometimes I have thought that, then what'll happen is you'll start changing what you're talking about on the podcast.
You can't do that.
You start getting super concerned because of this imaginary number. Who fucking knows what the number is? It really doesn't matter. Like we have to only stay in the moment,
Well, that's the beauty of it because on one side there's this huge like crazy abstraction, but I mean, I did your podcast. First time I ever did a podcast. First time I ever heard of a podcast was Duncan reached out to me and invited me to be on his podcast. And I was like, what the fuck's a podcast? And who the fuck is Duncan? And but I was living in Spain, and I was going to be in LA visiting my parents, and so I agreed to do it. And I thought, okay, I'm going to some studio, because Sex at Dawn had come out a year earlier or something. I was doing a lot of media or whatever. And I went to the address expecting it to be a studio, and it was Duncan's house. And I walked in, and there were 2 chairs and a table and some mics set up. And Duncan said, "You want to get high?" No, thanks. "You want some mushrooms?" No, thanks. "You want a beer?" "All right, I'll have a beer." And then it's like, okay, push the button. We talked, and that was it. And then we went out and had dinner.
That's right.
Yeah, it was amazing. And I was like, that's a podcast. Wow.
Yeah, I love
It's
it, man.
so simple.
Well, it's humanizing, right? I mean, that's the idea. Is I think we, hopefully, there was a time when people didn't have access to this technology, and that was the time where people developed these like famous personalities and like these insane ideas of there being some kind of wall between them and everybody else based on they're being famous or something like that. And it's really gross. Some people are still like that. Like some people are all fucking puffed up and they think that there is some difference between them and other people. Yeah. And I think one of the beautiful things about podcasting is it's allowed a venue for us to be human. Like my favorite comedian is Doug Stanhope.
Sure.
And the reason I love him so much is because he's an exorcist, because he's completely honest. And when you go and see him, he's purely bellowing out exactly who he is.
Yeah.
And the thing that he is on paper, you might not be like, that's the healthiest thing to be. It's like, but because of his pure honesty and his incredible talent and how fucking funny he is, you realize like that is the thing to be. This is something that Ram Dass talks about that I love a lot, which is that we have to honor our incarnation. Have you ever heard that before?
No.
So it's like, the idea is you start getting into spirituality or whatever, spirituality, mindfulness, consciousness, whatever they call it. And you start thinking, I was just talking to someone, maybe he's here. Last night I was talking to him and he was telling me how he'd gone on a hike. I don't know exactly which mountain he'd gone to the top of here. And he was looking out and it was just beautiful. It was just spellbindingly beautiful. And he felt so good. And then within a few sentences, he's like, yeah, but I got to start meditating, man. It's like, you are that is it. Like we always have this idea of who we should be if we were good, right? And who we should be if we were okay. And the problem with TV in the past is corporations present this idea of what a healthy human looks like, right? They're in shape. They're symmetrical generally. If they're asymmetrical, they're still like incredibly classically beautiful. And they have a job.
Pickup truck.
They have a fucking they usually have like a very expensive Range Rover that they're in debt to the banks for. Usually that's what a healthy human looks like.
26.
Yeah.
What is that, 21 Forever? Is that what that shop is called?
Forever 21.
Fuck that shop. 21. Forever 21. Are you fucking kidding me? No, thanks.
Oh, you mean the age, like Forever 21?
Like if you're gonna be stuck at an age for the rest of your life, what age would you be stuck at?
Probably 21. I mean, because the thing you're forgetting is like I think of it like Forever 21 in the sense like it's a vampire. Like somebody turned that person into a vampire when they're 21,
right.
But they're really like 300.
Right. Okay.
So that's when you want to be Forever 21 because like
it's vampire clothing they sell there. Is that what?
I guess so. That's a cool
shop.
Would make it a lot cooler. I'd probably
be.
shop there if it was vampire clothing.
Yeah.
But so I know what you mean, though. Like, you don't want to be literally 21 forever, completely confused, astoundingly, like, unhappy because you haven't figured out what you're going to do with your life.
Yeah,
and
terrified.
Yeah.
Although when I was 21, I think that was when I went to prison in Alaska. So maybe that's why I'm...
What did you go to prison for?
Shoplifting.
What did you shoplift?
A Snickers bar.
That is so crazy. How long? What was your sentence?
4 days. Memorial Day weekend. That's in May, right? I always get Memorial Day and Labor Day week. Yeah, it was a Thursday, and my friends and I had been hitchhiking from Skagway up through the Yukon and across to Fairbanks. So we'd been, camping for 10 days or something, and we got there, and it's a long story, but we basically, two of us went to the grocery store because the one guy wanted to call his girlfriend, and while we waited for a guy to get off the payphone, we walked around pretending we were shopping, and I ate a Snickers bar, and we got caught, and one thing led to another. And so we were in this medium security prison for 4 days, waiting for the magistrate to come in on Tuesday.
Were you wearing underwear?
No. I was not. It's funny you mention that because what we did, I wasn't. I went to prison with no underwear, and I was 21. We not only was I not wearing underwear, I was wearing shorts.
Whoa, shit.
Yeah, because what happened was,
How short?
Short. This was the 80s,
Oh, man.
So this was before the surfer shorts came in.
Wow.
Yeah, so what happened was the three of us had been hitchhiking, and it was me, a dude from Telluride named Rob, and his buddy Brent, who was a black Mormon, who had been adopted by Mormon cattle ranchers at birth. So anyway, those two were traveling together. I sort of hitched up with them. We got a ride. And so we got to Fairbanks. The first place we went was this laundromat because in Alaska, some of you are from Alaska, I imagine, the laundromats have showers and they're like kind of set up for travelers to like go in and clean up and everything. And so we went to this laundromat and we put all our clothes in the washing machine because everything we had stank, or stunk. I'm not sure the grammar there.
Right,
but
both.
Probably both, yeah. So we put everything in. So all three of us were wearing a jacket with no shirt and shorts with no underwear and boots with no socks because everything's in the washer. And then we went over and got arrested and 4 days later got out.
Wow. So
Two of us. The other guy was in the laundromat like, where the fuck are they? Actually, we called from the prison. We got our one call and we called the laundromat. And we're like, is there a dude who's been sitting there for about 4 hours looking nervous? Like, yeah, you, buddy, get over here.
Wow.
Like, where the fuck are you guys? We're in prison, man.
Did you run into trouble in prison? Anybody fuck with you?
What happened was when they did the intake, the dude who did the intake looked at the report, and my buddy, Rob from Telluride, had drunk kefir, this liquid yogurt shit, which I'd never even heard of. Anyway, so he looked on the report and it's like Snickers bar and a kefir? Are you fucking kidding me? And this cop brought you in handcuffs? And it was like, the guy was an asshole, And so I had I had a pipe and a little weed, and which wasn't illegal at the time, but didn't predispose the cop to like me much. And
Wait, I thought, how is it in Alaska that weed was not illegal?
Yeah,
in the
weed
80s?
in the early 80s, weed, you could have up to 4 plants in Alaska.
Wow.
Yeah, as an adult, and you could carry up to an ounce legally. Anyway, so the guy was doing the intake, and I said, like, I'm never going to see that pipe again, right? And he's like, yeah, probably not. I said, and I'm never going to see that weed. I don't even know if there is weed there. And he's like, oh, because basically what I was saying is, like, if you want the weed, take it, it's
Right.
yours. And so we sort of built a nice rapport, and he said, look, I'm not going to put you guys in with the general population. I'm going to put you in on cots in the gym.
Nice.
And you just stick together and you'll be fine. And we stayed together. And actually, it was a really valuable experience for me because, I mean, you see those doors close, and it's like, nobody gives a fuck who your daddy is, Nobody cares that you went to college or you're smart or you know a lot
Right.
about Ralph Waldo fucking Emerson.
Yeah.
Which is, what I knew about at the
Yeah.
time. So, yeah, it was an interesting experience. And I remember this one guy, like the sort of guy I imagined that I was most scared of, like a big black dude was in there for, murder or something, putting his arm around me and saying, "You're going to be all right, little man."
You're going to be all right, Snickers. That's what I'm gonna call you now, Snickers, my friend.
And we had the conversation like, do we lie about what we're in for in order to scare people away for a few days, or do we come clean,
Right.
you know? And we just, when I'm in trouble, I always tell the truth, only when I'm in trouble. And so we told the truth, and people just thought it was hilarious.
I bet. Yeah, I mean, you know that thing that you're talking about, the doors closing?
Yeah.
Have you read this book, the Gulag Archipelago, that Jordan Peterson talks about all the time?
Alexander Solzhenitsyn.
Yes. I'm so glad you could pronounce his name, because I was just going to say Gulag Archipelago and skip over the author. But he taught, there's a description in there about arrest, what it's like to be arrested, and how the moment you're arrested, this basically a chasm opens up between you and the world that you used to be a part of. And that chasm it gets to a point where you're gone. You're gone.
Yeah.
You are gone. And this is why, this is something that just fucking pisses me off, man. When Jeff Sessions is like sending out letters to people, or sending out letters saying that we should start enforcing the mandatory minimum prison sentences. And this is something that I think is so haunting right now. You're fine. You were fine. You made a friend in there. You got a free Snickers bar.
Yeah.
You shoplifted the right way by putting it in your stomach. They couldn't get it out. But one of the haunting things that like really gets to me is how all of us are kind of programmed to ignore the fact that our prisons are filled up with people, some of them who did just take a Snickers bar, many of them who just had some mushrooms, or, I know someone who a few years ago got busted with mushrooms, and it's really fucking scary, and like how his attorney told him, if they want to, they can put you in jail for 20 years for this. 20 years. Think about that. The next time you're like joking about it or talking about it on the phone with people or whatever, really think about that. Man, I'm being a bummer. Fucking watch out. Seriously, because this is the thing that like really gets to me, because as a society, we ignore the fact that our prisons are filled up with all of these sweet Snickers. There's so many Snickers right now, so many people in there right now who did nothing at all. Nothing at all.
What's interesting that, one of the things I talk about a lot on my podcast, and you do as well, is consciousness and sacred plants and, the healing potential of psychedelics and all this. And it's so interesting that every culture that's ever had access to these substances has seen them as the greatest gift of the gods. The greatest thing that the gods have bestowed upon humanity was this peyote or these mushrooms, or in Africa, this dance that helps you enter a trance, right? The musical forms in Africa. And here we are in this weird aberration, the one society where you go to prison for longer for having a significant quantity of hallucinogens than if you had killed someone.
Right.
Minimum mandatory sentences for second-degree murder are less than they are for like a pound of mushrooms. What does that say?
What do you think?
Every society saying this is great, except there's one society that says we'll put you in a cage for the rest of your life. To me, what that says is those societies value truth. This society is terrified of truth.
Wow.
Yeah. But let's talk about floating. You know what I saw the first time I floated?
Hold on, wait. We're not going to fucking talk about floating. He didn't want to.
He's a cop. Fuck
Wait.
that guy.
Hold on. We'll get to floating.
All right.
But before we dive into that, I want to talk about this idea of truth. If you're saying that our society doesn't want us to contact this truth, what is that truth? Like, what is it telling us? What is the message that we're getting from mushrooms, from LSD, from ayahuasca? What is the message that we're getting that this society that we're in right now doesn't want us to have?
Well, I think, you can look at an intermediary level and say it's about valuing the integrity of nature over an open pit mine. It's about valuing relationships and sensuality over ambition and acquisition of material things, those sorts of things. I mean, there are a lot of examples of that, right? Love over possession, all these kinds of things. But I think on a more profound level, what those substances have shown me, and I think show a lot of people, is the deepest truth is that there are many truths. And so doubt is sort of the only thing you should really ever be certain of. And that the culture's values, that the culture is so insistent on instilling in you, you start to question them. So I think it's not that these substances or physical travel, which I consider to be very similar to tripping. That's why I guess we call it tripping.
Right.
It shows you what Joseph Campbell, the mythologist, called detribalization, where you recognize that you're part of a tribe, and then it's like, oh, wait, I'm in a tribe, so all the shit that I think is true is just what my tribe says. I just speak that language. So then you get out and you start looking back from another place where you see multiple truths and multiple worlds.
Right.
And then you're in a whole different way of thinking, so that when your government says, pledge allegiance, motherfucker, you're like, to what?
Right.
Go fight in this war. For whom?
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's critical thinking is basically what these substances instill in a strange way.
And this idea is an idea I think about quite a bit, because the implication of what you're saying is that there is a conspiracy that is so dark. It's so dark that you could almost just, as a form of laziness, call it Luciferianism. Not to insult Lucifer. Actually, I don't want to. Probably isn't Luciferianism, because Lucifer was a rebel angel.
Yeah.
But it's like this idea is so incredibly dark. And this is where, I think that there's a lot of walls that have been built inside of us. A lot of walls that we're not supposed to cross if we are going to be productive members of American society.
Right.
And one of the walls is this wall that you're talking about, because the question is, who fucking built this wall? Who built this wall between us and these substances? Who is it? Is it Jeff Sessions? Is there, and I would love to know your thoughts on this. Do you think there's an organized cabal of people who are like, we can't let them take mushrooms or they'll realize that we're lizards? Do you... I mean, do you think
maybe
that?
Maybe not lizards, maybe assholes.
Okay, so, right. Yeah, lizards are cool. I
think...
I don't mean to diss lizards or Lucifer here, man, but who's behind it, man? I mean, it's like a real problem. Who's behind it? Who's engineered it?
I think there are different levels. So you can look at it, if you want to look at it as a conspiracy, I think there's plenty of evidence for that. So you look at Harry Anslinger, for example, who was the head of the division of the government that was responsible for enforcing the laws in prohibition against alcohol distribution. So then whatever amendment it was that made alcohol legal again was passed, and then he was like, oh shit, now this whole division of the government's going to be liquidated, I'm going to lose a job, everyone's going to lose their job, we need to find something else to prohibit.
Right.
So what's it going to be? Well, blacks and Mexicans are using this marijuana stuff, so let's drum up a lot of hysteria against that so we won't lose our jobs. So that's the origins of the anti-marijuana crusade in the United States. It was all about the flow of money and keeping the money moving. Then you have the example in the Nixon administration where I think it was H.R. Haldeman who was recently interviewed about this, who some of you might remember was in the cabinet. I don't remember what his position was. But he said, talking about the drug laws, the draconian Nixon war on drugs thing, primarily against hallucinogens and marijuana, he said, we knew that psychedelics and marijuana weren't health hazards, but we needed to isolate and neutralize the people who were protesting the Vietnam War, which was mostly the hippies, and the people who were agitating in the cities, which was the blacks. And those are drugs that those people were using, so we made them illegal so we could throw them in prison, investigate them, wipe them out. He said this in an interview. I don't remember. I mean, look it up online.
Yeah, I know
it's
what you're talking
everywhere.
about.
You know what I'm talking about? It was like in Vanity Fair or something
Yeah.
recently. And so, you know, there it is. It's like they know, anyone who looked at marijuana with any seriousness knew damn well it wasn't dangerous.
But we're many presidents away from Nixon, and they're still enforcing these insane laws. So
They're enforcing it against black people, against poor people. See, this is the thing. Like,
Right.
I mean, I don't know about your friend who got busted with the mushrooms, and it's true that a lot of people at Dead shows were getting busted, and there's a lot
Yeah.
of bullshit around that. But you could, if you have access to lawyers, you know. I mean, I went to a college where everybody was tripping every weekend. And no, there were never cops there.
well, so now we enter into something that's like even more horrifying, which is that now we have like this is where my mind really starts fucking spinning, which is that so this country is built on slavery. We all know that. And slavery ends except in the prisons, because in the prisons people have to work. You have to work. There's work. So a lot of, like, I guess license plates really do get made in prisons. Lots of
Live
shit.
free or die. Live free or die.
Yes.
New Hampshire slogan on the
So
license plates.
If you really want your fucking head to spin, think about this. Our attorney general from Alabama wants to start enforcing mandatory minimums again. For those of you who don't know what that is, that means that if you get pulled over and you've got some acid in your pocket, you will go to jail for 5 years. There is a 5-year mandatory minimum.
The judge cannot not send you to jail.
Yes, you're going to jail. So when you think about the statistics, which is that, yeah, more than likely, you're not going to jail if you're white. If you're not going to get busted, you're not going to get pulled over. But if you're black, you're going. Yeah. And when you're in prison, you're going to have to do slave labor. So if you really want your fucking head to spin, think about that. A fucking attorney general from Alabama has figured out a way to make slavery happen again. Yeah. That's spooky, man. Yeah. That's spooky. And that's really happening right now. And this is a thing where I wanted to ask you, because when my head starts spinning like that, I start feeling hopeless, Chris Ryan. So, you know, another example is I was just in the airport and like going through TSA. Thick fucking security. It's getting worse. They're getting worse about it now. Like, they're getting more intense, more scrutinizing, more like authoritarian. They don't. And there was a period with the TSA where they would try to be sweet. They're not doing that anymore. And as I was walking into the fucking TSA, there's like these like hardcore thuggish looking fucking cops, you know, packing heat, looking at all of us, tourists, kids, old ladies. No one there is going to hurt anybody, right? And we're being fucking processed. Our shit's being rifled through. And we accept it. We're just like, yeah, this is what it's like now. Our shit gets rifled through now. We just get rifled through and we want to travel. And I had this very hopeless feeling. I thought, how does this get better? When does this change? Can this change? Is there anything that could be done to make this go away? What do you think?
You want me to say this publicly?
Yes.
Well, you know, I've lived in Europe most of my life, right? And I think one of the things that's interesting in Europe is that the memory of fascism is fresh, relatively. There are lots of people who remember when Spain was like that, right? Franco died in the 70s, late 70s. World War II, the Spanish Civil War. It's recent. So I think there's a vigilance in people there, not to let shit go that way again, that is lacking in the U.S. There's a lot of I've been driving around in Idaho, and there's all these signs, all this political sloganeering and stuff. But I think, most of these yahoos in the mountains with their AR-15s, if shit gets bad, they're not serious. They're not going to be shooting at military vehicles. I think Americans are so out of touch with war because all the war, and we're an incredibly warlike culture, but we export it. We send the soldiers off, and then we ignore them when they get back.
We've been at war, the 80% of American history, we've been at war.
Yeah, and that's, I don't know, probably 100% if you really look at it. But anyway, I mean, what can be done? I think that what we're doing here is actually what can be done. I think we're using podcasts. You guys are using float tanks. Other people are using ayahuasca and sacred substances or meditation or all these different techniques to free your mind and your heart and your ability to communicate with other people. I think that's where revolution really happens. The revolution of the bombs in the street and the fires and the kind of public screaming sirens, I feel like that, it's meet the new boss, same as the old boss shit,
Right.
It's some other power just takes over and plays the same game.
Right.
The only way to have a real revolution, they say think globally, act locally. I would take that, act personally. You have a revolution in your life, in your heart, in your marriage, in your friendships, and hopefully that ripples out and becomes a better world. That's all I got.
You had that revolution? You've had that revolution inside of you?
I think that I never signed on to modernity in the first place.
Right.
I was retired the day I finished college, I've never really plugged into, I haven't had a job since the 90s.
So right. So, but what about people who have had the job and people who are, firmly solidified inside of the system?
I think they're feeling it. There's this line that we quote in Sex at Dawn from Arthur Miller, the playwright, who says, an era can be considered over when its basic illusions have been exhausted.
Wow.
Right? And I think you look at the world we're living in now, especially those of you who are, over 35 or 40 who have some perspective on this. If you look back, 20 years, all these institutions were respected. The church, this is before the whole priest sex abuse scandal came out. The church was still respected. Wall Street was a conservative place where you could park your money and not have to worry about it. The banking sector was safe and conservative.
Yeah.
Take whatever, sports.
The president.
The politics, yeah, of course. That's the worst of it.
Remember that? The president used to be that was like a respected position.
Yeah. Anyway, all these institutions are just collapsing.
Yeah.
And so I think that a lot of people are saying, this doesn't fucking work anymore, right? People are saying, oh, I'm going to have less money than my parents. Well, when did that turn?
Right.
It used to be it was getting better and better. Now nobody thinks it's getting better and better, the climate change and whatever. So I think a lot of people, I think we're at this really exciting, heartbreaking, fascinating moment where a lot of people are looking for alternatives. And I think that explains why podcasts are taking off, because the technology's there, but the beauty of it is you do a podcast, you click a few buttons, it goes out to however many thousands of people are listening to it. There's no company in between. Right. There's no studio executive. There's no money man. Right. It's just you talking to whomever's listening. And so there's a level of truth and authenticity that can happen there that I think is fucking revolutionary. I think it's as revolutionary as the printing press.
Right. Yeah, well, okay, so it's an example of technology working for us, but just in a from a real world perspective, because you're one of the most free people that I know. Most people I know don't swim in rivers. Most people I know don't travel around in vans. Most people I know are localized.
Yeah.
Most people I know are deeply intertwined with the grid. So as someone out there, to those of us in here, I mean, surely starting a podcast is not the answer, right? I'm looking, what I want from you. I want the fucking answer, Ryan. I want you to help us, man. I want you to help us. Like, what can we do? What are some real things we can do to experience this kind of revolution that you're talking about that happens inside first? What can we do, those of us who haven't had that revolution? What are some tricks, some tips, some ways that maybe we can end up floating naked down a river, stop not wearing underwear, and fucking, how can we start shoplifting Snickers?
Yeah. See, I don't. One of my favorite quotes is respect those who seek the truth, fear those who claim to have found it. Mm. So I don't claim to have found any truth, and so I'm very hesitant to, give people advice. People I don't know, especially. But my feeling is, my friend Aaron and I were talking about this the other day. There are things that you do in life that you become accustomed to really quickly, and there are other things you do in life that you'll never get accustomed to. So working in a cubicle under fluorescent lights, you can do it every day, but it'll never feel right. Whereas staring into a campfire at night, it feels right immediately. And, after a week or two of that, you check into the Hilton Hotel down here, and it's like, this sucks.
Right.
It's loud. You can't open the windows. Where's the fire? Where's the stream? Where's the sound of the birds and the wind going through the pine trees?
Right.
So I think that there's a guide there. There's for me anyway, there's a navigational device where you, like, for example, a couple of weeks ago, I went to North Carolina to have some people on the podcast who are building a community there. And so they've got the animals and they grow their own food, and they're really interesting people because one of the sort of triggers for the coming together of this community was a very tragic death that happened about a year ago. Two, actually, they happened. One was a surprise and one they saw coming. And those deaths have given a lot of meaning to this group of people and what they're trying to do together. And anyway, the point is, there are like 20 people living there, and every one of those people was so fucking authentic. Just no bullshit at all, And I was only there 4 or 5 days, I think. And then when I left and went to the airport and, started dealing with normal shit, suddenly I was aware of how clean that was there. Mm-hmm. It's as if I'd been drinking clean water. And when you're drinking clean water, you don't go like, well, that's some clean water, right. But you notice then when you go back to the fucking Gatorade,
right,
that this doesn't taste right.
Right.
And so I think that's the guide, like things that I sort of fit into really quickly and easily, and they, I try to follow that. And that, right. I don't know. That's all I got.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I think a lot of us are afraid to follow that. And one of the things whenever I get around you, and when I listen to your podcast and I hear the song that you sing.
The theme song?
Yeah, the theme song.
By Carsey Blanton.
I don't mean literally your theme song.
Oh.
The theme song of your podcast.
Okay.
Whenever I listen to the theme song of your podcast, I just want to make mail bombs and send them to people.
Okay, but the theme song is cool. So finish your point. We'll get to the theme song.
I mean, your song, the song of Chris Ryan.
Oh, I got you.
That's in Sex at Dawn, your song. Whenever I hear this song, There's like actually in the mythology of Krishna, there's something, you know about the Rasa Leela? You must know about the Rasa Leela. Oh, cool. I get to tell you about the Rasa Leela. You'll like this. So the Rasa Leela, what happens is in this mythology, Krishna goes out into the forest and starts playing his flute. And there's, in the villages, the gopis, as they're called, the women are there, and they hear Krishna's flute. And and this is written in really beautiful poetry, but they basically leave the lantern burning, and they go into the clearing to find God because they hear this song. And they leave everything behind because the song is just so beautiful that whatever they thought was important ceases to be important. And like 100 of them gather in this clearing. And then Krishna divides himself into 100 different Krishnas, transforms into the ultimate lover for each of these people, like their soulmate, essentially. And they do it out there, man. They make love in this clearing. And what could be more ecstatic than making love with God? You know, what could be better than that? And so when I hear the song that you sing, it scares me because I think, God, you know, man, really, I could just do that. I could just let go of everything, invest all my money into like a van and just like go, just get out, just go out into the wilderness. And it's really scary. There's a piece of me that like wants to do that very badly. But there's another piece that's clinging to the world that like feels there's got to be this one way to live. But if all of us start doing what you're doing, what would society look like? If everybody heads out, if everyone listens to you and they're like, you know what, this is fucking stupid. Not only am I going to sit in front of a fucking campfire, I'm going to make the campfire out of my goddamn cubicle, and I'm going to fucking warm my hands on the fires of my old life in the woods. If everyone did that, what would happen to the world? Wouldn't everything collapse?
A lot of the bullshit would collapse. Yeah, I mean, think how many jobs that people are doing in cubicles actually really need to be done at all. And then how many of them are going to be done by some fucking algorithm? You know, there are going to be very few jobs left in 20 years because of AI and robotics and all this kind of stuff. And so I think as a society, we need to really seriously look at how are we going to distribute the wealth that's, you know, so far we're not doing it well. It's all going to the very, very, very top. Yeah. And to me, one of the ultimate ironies and tragedies of modernity is, for this book I've been sort of working on, as you may have gleaned from this conversation, I'm not particularly ambitious. So I've been working on a book for about 4 years now. It was due 3 years ago, and my editors are, for some reason, very patient about it. And it's called Civilized to Death, and it'll be out someday. But anyway, one of the things I was looking at in this book is I was looking at this sort of economic question, right? And how and the correlation between happiness and wealth and these kind of things. And what you find, and all the research shows it, is that people get happier when they go from poverty to about 60 or 70 grand a year per individual, right? But that's basically the level where you've got enough money, you got a place to live. If you get sick, you can pay a doctor. You don't need to worry your kids are going to starve. You have your basic shit covered. After that, there's little, if any, correlation between satisfaction, life satisfaction, and income. And actually, it gets to a point where there becomes a negative correlation. So to me, the great irony is everybody's chasing money, and a few people are getting a whole lot of it, and they're miserable fucks. So if the winners in this poker game we're playing at the table here are as miserable or more miserable than the losers, then who benefits from this?
Right.
So I used to look at economics as like a poker game among a bunch of buddies. If I won $20, it means somebody else lost $20. right? The same amount of money comes and goes. It's a zero-sum
Yeah.
game. Now I look at it as a poker game at a casino. So now, who's the house?
Right.
Right? Because we're all losing.
Right.
Nobody wins at a casino.
Wow.
Right? Even if you win, you lose it later, right?
Yeah.
So then this gets in, I mean, we don't have a lot of time, but this gets into this sort of deeper conception for me where I started looking at levels of life. And so you have the simplest matter, which is inorganic life, and then you have simple life, single cellular, bacteriums, and then you have multicellular, and then you get up to the most complex forms of life, which I think are social mammals, like us, chimps, bonobos, dolphins, maybe insects, some, anthills and things like that. And then you say, okay, why would it stop there?
Right.
Right? Of course, we always think we're the ultimate, but the scales continue, right? There's visible light, but there's wavelengths above it and below it, right? So what's after us? Each of us is made of many billions of microbes that don't share our DNA. Each of us is, we think of you as an individual and me as an individual, but that's all a fiction. We're a system of all these different organisms working together. So then what are we embedded within? And that's when I get into superorganisms.
Right.
So we are embedded in these superorganisms that we can't see because we're within them.
Right.
And so the agenda of the superorganisms, which are institutions, I think, run counter to ours. So that's why, we say, why are we destroying the earth? Well, we're not really. These superorganisms are. And they don't give a shit. And so, it's like people will say to me, hey, you're always pissing on oil companies because they're destroying the ocean. There are good people who work at oil companies. And there are.
Right.
There are. But it doesn't matter because people don't run companies. Companies run people.
Ugh.
The CEO of Exxon could go to Peru and take some ayahuasca and have a fucking epiphany and go in on Monday morning and say, gentlemen, we got to stop this deep water drilling. We can't control it. It's irresponsible. We're destroying the planet. He's out of there by fucking lunchtime.
Right.
It doesn't matter if there are good people working there.
That thing about, this is like, I was talking to a friend of mine who was like, yeah, we've got to get the president to take ayahuasca. And I was thinking like, man, you're rolling the dice on that one.
Yeah. He's already unstable.
Yeah, because it's like, I think there is this idea of like, oh, if we get these people to psychedelics, if we get them to float, if we get them, they're going to be like, wow, yeah, I've got to change. But I bet the president of Exxon drinks ayahuasca, and somewhere in that experience, he's like, I am God. I am God. And oil is beautiful. We don't know.
That could happen.
But yeah, what you're saying is so crazy, which is that we have essentially become particles in some kind of malevolent organism that is actively eating planet Earth.
Right. So the way I look at it is like we are in a school of salmon that we're swimming toward the nets, right? And some of us are going, are those nets up there?
Right.
Fuck it. I'm going over here, right? You guys, you want to go into the nets? I don't think you should, but I'm going this way.
The other salmon are like, dude, you're too high, man.
Yeah.
You're doing too many drugs. There's no nets.
Right. So you're asking me like, what's revolution? I think revolution is when enough fish go, I don't want to. No, those are fucking nets. I'm going with them.
Right.
And we start peeling off, and there's a critical point where one more fish peels off, and then the whole school goes, oh, fuck it, and we'll go that way.
Then they move the nets.
Well, then they move the nets, maybe, yeah. Yeah. It's true.
We got to get the motherfuckers holding the nets, man.
Get them high.
That's what we got to do. I mean, I don't know the answer. I love that, though. I know what you mean. And I think that, like, the beauty of what folks here are doing is I think when you go, you don't have to take psychedelics to see I think just floating alone can have that
I mean,
effect.
in your opening bit there, it was really beautiful. You were like, the beauty of floating is you get there, and when you were talking about like adding this, adding that, I was thinking like I never wanted to do that. I never wanted to get high. I've never even smoked a joint and gone in a tank. I want to go there to strip it down, right? And I'm glad you circled around to that, where that's the beauty. You don't need anything. You don't need a fucking screen to keep you interested. You don't need, things beeping and, you can be alone. I had a friend and took her to a float thing, and she couldn't last 15 minutes in there.
Huh.
And I felt so bad for her afterwards,
Yeah.
So bad. You can't be alone in your head for 90 minutes or 60 minutes or 20 minutes.
Right.
What hell is happening in your head,
Right.
So, yeah, I think stripping it down to the basics. I mean, the theme song on my podcast is by this beautiful woman, Carsey Blanton, and the song is called "Smoke Alarm," and she says it's like, "Hey baby, what's the big deal? Say what you're gonna say, feel what you're gonna feel, because you're gonna die one day." And it's the whole song is like, we're gonna die one day. I hate to give the end away, but you're gonna die one day. And you keep reminding yourself of that, and then all the shit that you're afraid to let go of is like, well, you're gonna let go of it anyway, dude.
Right.
Might as well let go of it now and enjoy the fucking ride, rather than clinging to it, to the bitter end.
Chris Ryan, everybody! Guys, we have about 20 minutes left, and we've got 2 microphones here. This is one of my favorite parts of the podcast. I forgot to mention it up front. Any of you guys who have questions for Chris or for me, I'd love it if you would come up to the microphones. We only have 20 minutes to take questions, so anybody who wants to ask a question, feel free to come up here and ask. Oh, the cop is the first one.
So, as a cop who's been in the force undercover for a long time, and I'm not trying to blow my cover, do you think that Donald Trump could possibly be the catalyst or the kickback for, what we've experienced as maybe the solution to open people's eyes up to ideology, different ideologues and whatnot? Because it's started to kind of, I feel like it's opened people's eyes and broken up a lot of biases that were formed on sociodynamic.
I hope so. I think that could definitely be one of the possible outcomes of this. They say addicts have to hit rock bottom before they start to recover, and if this isn't rock bottom, I don't want to see it. I hope so. I'm not a political theorist, so I can't say for sure, but it certainly seems, as Duncan pointed out, the presidency is one of those institutions that's lost its what's the word I'm looking for? It's
well, it's like my
relevance.
dad says, we must respect the office of the president.
Yeah.
Right?
But what if the president doesn't respect the office of the president? Which is the case.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he is. I think there is something in him that is divine for sure. He seems to be a reflection of our shadow. A billionaire reality TV star is the president now. And let's face it, if you were running a simulation and you wanted to create the funniest apocalypse, it does seem artistic to be like, all right, they fucking like money and TV. All right, let's make their fucking president be a Frankenstein monster composed of everything that they have become addicted to. And let's see what happens. That's one level. The other level is making the president a catalyst. I always think of Ram Dass and how he has on his puja table a picture of the president. And no matter who that president may be, he tries to find compassion there. Because what a fucking heavy incarnation, man. Heavy, heavy incarnation. To be that stuck in that place where you're casually suggesting that you might incinerate a country with nuclear fire. Yeah. So it's like, if you think about that, how that, I mean, like, I'm just think of the worst thing you ever did when you were super drunk, and you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, fuck, oh no, I've got to call like 7 people and apologize. Think of Trump's morning when he comes off of the bender that he's on and he wakes up and it's like, oh, fuck, I'm president. Oh, shit. Oh, wow. I fucking caused the apocalypse. That's a heavy incarnation. So maybe we could find a place to have some compassion for him or something. And that could be the transformative thing. What do you got? Is that it? No more questions. That's it. No one wants to talk to us. Wow.
Everyone's depressed.
Sorry, we bummed you out. What's your
This
question?
guy over here.
So yeah, tell us about your best float experience individually.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, that's cool. The first time I floated, I don't know that it was my best, but I don't judge them that way. But the first time, I think it might have been in Austin, Texas, at Kevin Johnson's place. Any of you been down there? Beautiful place. I was lying there, and I've tried meditating for years. I've been to the 10-day Vipassana retreat. I've done, martial arts with an incorporated meditation, and I've never gotten past my fucking back hurts stage. My knees hurt, my back hurts, my hips hurt, my neck hurts. And I mean, the 10-day Vipassana thing was like a 10-day porn festival in my head. That's all I did. I just sat there and imagined. It didn't work, Unless that's nirvana, which it may be. But the first time I floated, I felt like something clicked in, and I got into this meditative state. I got into the thing where it's like, oh, there's my mind working. Now I observe it. It slows down. It stops. And then whatever I am that's observing it starts to disappear. And then I wake up, but I wasn't asleep. And it's like, wow, that's where I've been trying to get for years and years. And I just got there in 15 minutes. And in part of that process of that sort of watching this weird shit that was happening in my mind, I saw this image of Joe Rogan's face with a halo and that big shit-eating grin he's got just float right across like the dome of my brain. And I thought, that's pretty funny.
Dude, that wasn't in your head. Kevin has a projector in the tanks. like Joe Rogan's face floats across.
Saint Joe.
Wow, shit. Cool, man. My best float experience was like kind of my most painful. It wasn't like euphoric. It was this was when I had a float tank in my house. I was doing it a lot, and I was starting to have like it was dislodging memories. And I was starting to have these memories that were long gone. I had this memory, a photographic memory of this, like, me and my brother, I was a kid, but me and my brother were, like, leaving. This summer we were staying with my dad. I mean, this is a horrible story I'm about to tell you, but I guess there was a little girl there who liked me. I was just a kid, and she came up to the car. And was like, I said something like, I love you. Oh, I hate saying this. I said something like, shut up, fatty. Like the worst fucking thing, man. And like I was trying to impress my brother, and it was just horrible. And so the tank showed me in vivid detail that moment and the look on her face and the way that I felt and the look of my brother's look of disgust as he looked at me. And it makes you realize, like, oh my God, if that's down there, if I'm that much of an asshole and that's compressed somewhere underneath my waking experience, how much other stuff is in there? You know, I just went to the dentist and, you know, he flosses you and there's a lot of blood. And I'm like, is there a lot of blood? There's a lot of blood, right? He's like, yeah, you got to get scaling, dude, because there's like fucking shit in your gums and it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. He said that. He's like, it's challenging. And I think for some people like me, that's what the float tank does. It gets into the gums of your psyche and gets in there deep. And sometimes there's fucking blood. And that's what it gave me. It gave me a moment to like really, really think about my own potentially aggressive patterns in life that I'm not aware of and help me hopefully be a little kinder, because that's all you can really do, you know? Because that little girl killed herself and her entire family, I found out. What was your question?
That's fantastic. I love that.
Thanks.
I'm just very curious. I've been someone who has been very curious to live off the grid most of my life because I have a rather unorthodox upbringing. So I was never really introduced to a lot of stuff that people consider normal now. So my question is, when and why did you decide to start living off the grid? And when you did, how did you survive initially?
Well, first thing I should say is off the grid is probably an overstatement for how I've lived my life. I mean, I'm not like the Unabomber or anything. You know, I travel in airplanes and drive a van and, you know, have a bank account and, you know, a cell phone right there. So I'm not technically off the grid, but off the sort of consumerist corporate kind of treadmill, yeah, I've been off that. What happened was that year I went to Alaska. I was in college, and I had a life plan. I was going to go to Oxford and do a PhD. I had a professor who was going to get me into Oxford. I was going to do a PhD, and I was going to teach literature the rest of my life. And the literature that I really loved the most was the American Transcendentalists, who some of you will know, Emerson, Thoreau, Whitman, Melville. And a lot of this stuff is sort of like an indigenous American Buddhism in a way, if you read them. You know, Thoreau, of course, famously wrote Walden, where he went off and lived in the woods for a year. So that's the stuff I loved, and that's the stuff that I was anticipating teaching for the rest of my life. And I found a loophole in the student handbook that allowed me to skip my junior year and still graduate on time, so I decided to go to Alaska to see the sort of frontier. And I hitchhiked from New York to Alaska and spent the summer up there working in a cannery and doing weird shit and getting arrested. And by the time I was done with that experience, I realized, like, I had met people on the road who picked me up, who took me home, who fed me, who, you know, let me sleep in their daughter's bedroom because she was away in college or something. And they're just so kind and so open-hearted. And, you know, these are people who didn't know, they didn't read a lot of books, they weren't hyper-educated, but they were so welcoming to me, and they were so competent. Like, I remember this one guy, like, he had built a house, he had these cool dogs who, like, were really well-trained and loved him, and he had a good relationship with his wife, and his kids were cool, and he knew how to fix his car. And it's like, this guy probably didn't graduate high school, but he had so much practical knowledge on how to live a good life. And I was struck by that, and I thought about what would happen to this guy if he stumbled into my world back at university with all my arrogant genius professor friends. They would have laughed at him. They would have rejected him. And yet my professor friends were kind of fucking miserable. Right. And that was the path I was on. And so I had this epiphany where it's like, wait a minute, I don't want to be like them. I want to be like that guy. Right? I want to be someone whose life makes sense. And so at that moment, I decided until I'm 30, I won't commit to anything. No marriage, no career, no grad school, no nothing. I'm going to spend my 20s. There's an image I loved from Robert Frost. He says, a poem must, like a piece of ice on a hot stove, a poem must ride its own melting. And I thought, I'm going to ride my melting through my 20s. And then it extended into my 30s, and I'm still fucking riding it.
Cool. Beautiful.
So, yeah.
I think you may have just answered my question, but since I took the trouble to get up here, I'll ask it anyway. I'm relative to unplugging from the grid or whatever, besides floating, which I think moves us from our mind into our heart. I've always thought that growing your own food, expanding that a little bit, is one of the most revolutionary and radical things that you can do, and I wanted to get your feedback on that.
Oh man, I'm growing tomatoes right now, and I'm growing tomatoes, and you know what? I did a podcast with Dennis McKenna, Terrence McKenna's brother, and he told me if you wanted the most revolutionary thing you can do is not just growing your own plants. I think he said it's to grow like psychoactive plants, right? So, but I think maybe he meant growing plants too. But and so because of that, I ordered some San Pedro cactus, and I have in my garden 3 beautiful San Pedro cacti that every single day break the law because they're making mescaline, right? And it's illegal. It's cool. I look at them. There's little chemical laboratories growing in my yard. I'm like, I'm gonna eat you. But I won't. I love them. I won't eat them. But but what you're saying is so true, because when you're watering the plants, you can. I feel like they are thanking you. I feel like they are dancing with the water, and that they're communicating with you, and that they're just, I think plants dance most of the time. And I think that you're kind of dancing with them, and they like are rewarding you. I bet there's things coming out of them that we haven't even identified yet, maybe what McKenna called exopheromones. Like, who knows? But so yes, growing food for me is like, how you know what's great? Is the stuff you remember, right? Like, you know what you don't remember? Plane rides. You don't really remember plane rides unless they're like really, like unless the plane crashed. You'll remember that one. You don't remember a lot of stuff. The bus ride. You don't remember the taxi rides. You don't remember waiting for the meal. You don't remember most meals. You don't remember much. But I'll tell you, man, I remember almost every time I've watered my tomato plants. That's such a moment.
And you water them long enough, you start hearing the nature spirits, and that moves you back again into your heart.
Can you talk about that for a second, the nature spirits? What do you mean by that?
Rather than watering plants, I'm really into bees. And if you have this incredible flowering plant where all the honeybees are visiting the flower, getting nectar from it, you hear this incredible buzzing. And I don't think you can have that experience without you know that there's some entity that they're representing or that they're a part of that makes your heart sing.
Yeah, man, I love you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All of this makes a lot of sense. Nobody has the answers, but everybody wonders, and all of this is true. My life has changed after I found floating, which is January of 2017. But I lost 60 pounds in a year and a half, went plant-based, no meat, no salt, no sugar, no bread, no eggs, no cheese, and just
What was the first thing you said? No what? The first on the list of things you stopped eating?
no sugar, no salt, no bread, no eggs. I don't know which I said first. I repeat this.
I'm just
over
noticing
the,
you didn't mention vodka.
Every day I repeat this 5 times. No to, I just say no to things and then rest I can do. I like freedom. So I pin down the things that I don't like.
Right.
And I just remember those because I want to stay happy. And I
Yes.
don't want to be like, okay, what do I need to remember to eat? Because life, keep your mind empty and free. Just
Yes.
remember the things you don't need because there is everything else you need. You need company, you need people, one religion, everybody respect each other. Eyes sees colors and bodies. Soul sees who's person sitting inside of you. So you want to meet the third eye and get to the person. If the persons are caring for you, that's it, no matter who that is. It's a simple question for floating that met a lot of the float owners all over, and everybody's, why floaters don't come back? Mine is 50% rate. Why are we judging? And if we're judging, there should be a rate. And how long and how often you need to float, is there a recommendation? Or people can decide, is that their own freedom? And how often you guys float? And those are the questions we're asking ourselves while we're in our float center. And I don't have a center yet. I just have a float tank in my basement. So I do float, but let's work on the problems that keeping us not happy, which is after the float is why the floaters are not coming. And this might be not a question for everybody. For me, it was just that, what is asking the people who has the knowledge. So how often we should float, how long we should float, or we even need to float once you open your mind, because like the guy said, you put your mind in your heart, and that's the end of the life. Now you know what you're doing,
Right.
your conscious mind.
Right.
Now what does floating takes a play after that?
Man, I think floating's bad for you.
That's what I wanted to hear.
I'm just
Because can I pick my own time when I want to float? My wife asked me, did you float today? When did you float last time? So I float when I want to get in. That's the only reason I get the tank in my basement, because I get up 1 o'clock in the morning and float. In 15 minutes, if I'm tired, I'm out back in my bed.
Right. Well, I think it's important to not be dogmatic about floating. I think that Kevin, who Chris was talking about, runs what I consider to be one of the great float centers of all time. Many of them are incredible, but it's a very special place in Austin. What I love about the way he addresses it is that there isn't any dogma there. It's just come and do this thing and let it do its work. And that's it. And it's beautiful. So, because you don't want to pressure somebody. It's like music. You love a song. And you don't want to tell somebody, this is the best song you ever heard, man. You got to listen to this song. How many times has someone tortured you in that way? Like, oh, I've heard this incredible song.
I don't like the word tortured. Forget who's torturing me. The word torture is not in my dictionary.
Well, you never heard this song, man.
I'm listening to the different.
Wait until you're on acid and somebody wants to show you a fucking Dave Matthews retrospective, brother. And you will know torture is the right word for that.
When I hear things during the daytime, if I feel like I'm being tortured, I just put this on. That's the reason I carry.
Great.
And I just stay happy throughout all day.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the question. A round of applause for this gentleman, everyone. We have time for one more question.
Hi. Thanks for coming, guys. It's a pleasure to see you live in person. In the spirit of the Float Conference, and just out of curiosity, if you had to open a float center, what would you name it? And you've seen the different styles of tanks. Do you have one that you would choose over the other?
Ooh, shit. What? Shit got real. I mean, you go
You're
first.
looking at two bad businessmen right here. You're asking the wrong people.
You can answer that. What would you name a float center?
Float free.
Come on.
Yeah, free. I like that. I like the idea that floating is freedom. You know, I like the idea of.
But people are going to think you're not charging.
I know. That's why I'm such a bad businessman.
You could put free in quotes.
How about float here now?
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to name mine. What do you name yours?
If I open a beer pub, it would be beer here now. You know.
That's cool. Drink
Yeah.
beer now?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm out of Ram Dass jokes. Yeah, I guess I don't know, man. And getting back to the woman before, I didn't really answer her question. Like, how do you finance this conventional life? I didn't get into that, and it related to what the gentleman after her said. Like, I've been growing weed for 20 years, which is helpful, allegedly, officer. But growing plants and I don't want to get back into that question, but I have no fucking clue what I would name my float center. Do you? Float at dawn.
Ooh, that's really good. Float at dawn.
Yeah. Although that I don't want to get up and open it at 5. You know, the only thing I want to do at dawn is in that book.
I don't know, man. I'd probably call it like King William's exclusive float palace. Yeah, as far as like the float tank itself, man. Oh man, my friend Kevin makes the best float tanks, man. They're cool.
Well, Kevin's getting a lot of love up here.
Yeah.
I hope he's out there somewhere.
Yeah.
Kevin?
There he is.
There he is.
Yeah, so I don't know enough about float tanks, so that's exactly what I would do. I would just go to him and have him make them for me. I mean, if I had like some supernatural powers or something like that, then I would make it out of like obsidian or something. It would be like made out of obsidian. It would be shaped like a pyramid made out of obsidian. It would be lined up perfectly with some kind of like Masonic ley lines or something like that. There would be a crystal hanging above it that like kind of like what they do at the temple in Burning Man that like barely touch the very tip of the obsidian pyramid, and the crystal would be like connected to some kind of moon antenna on the roof of the float center so that it like somehow called down moonlight into the float tank so that people were like conduits for some kind of
like a Turkish bath, sort of.
Yeah, that's it. That's what it would be, man. And I could go on for a long time. There'd be like, a lot of like cats around. Like dogs and cats to hang out with after your float. I think that'd be nice when you're relaxed to have like friendly dogs and cats climbing on top of you that you could pet. And then there would probably be like definitely like an LSD chemist there or something like that. And after the float, of course, not during it or during it, whatever. And that would be it. That's my float center, and it'd be the greatest fucking float center of all time. That would be it. Thanks for the question. That's it. Friends, we are out of time. Thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. A big round of applause for Chris Ryan, everybody. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you at the party. Hare Krishna.